Hello and welcome to my first look at the talent system in World of Warcraft Dragonflight and specifically the talent trees for the Deathknight class. Recently, Blizzard have released some in-depth information about the talent system, including how many points you get to spend, what the design principles and goals of the new system are. We also got a first look at Druid and Deathknight talent trees. In this video, I'm going to focus primarily on my first impression and feedback for the Deathknight class talent tree. Videos about the Frost, Unholy and Blood trees will follow, so make sure to subscribe for more content. The Dragonflight talent system is quite different to previous iterations. You now have two talent trees to spend points in. First you have the class tree, where you get to spend 31 points at max level 70, and then you have the specialization tree, where you have 30 points available. The class tree gives you access to core abilities and has a high amount of utility choices, which according to Blizzard should not interfere much with throughput performance of your chosen role. Here you will get access to most combat related class utility spells like Deathstrike, Icebound Fortitude and Anti-Magic Shell, but also some throughput spells like Empower Rune Weapon, Abomination Limb and Soul Reaper. The interesting part is that these spells are now available to all specs of the class, which will allow for various combinations that we have not had access to before, like Blood Decay with Blinding Sleet or Frost Decay with Soul Reaper. There is some issues with this approach, especially with the current iteration of the Deathknight class tree. We'll go further in depth about the problem later on in the video. The specialization tree is where most of your throughput and playstyle choices regarding your chosen specialization lie. This includes signature abilities like Breath of Sindragosa, returning legendary effects such as Rage of the Frozen Champion, but also baseline spec abilities like Obliterate, Froststrike and Howling Blast. Many of the choices in both the class and the specialization tree are not really choices in my opinion, but rather are supposed to replace learning of new spells while leveling. The player gets rewarded with talent points that they then spend on pretty default talents in the beginning, but then have harder choices to make later on. I don't think there is something inherently wrong with this approach, but the talent layout and positions of certain talents can become an issue, as we're going to see later. The first thing that sticks out to me is that every specialization is represented by one column each in this tree. Depending on which specialization you choose, you get the first talent in that column for free, and are incentivized to spend further talent points on that path. There are a lot of DK spells which were previously baseline in this talent tree, and to unlock all of them, you will need to spend quite a lot of talent points. To regain the utility in Dragonflight that you previously had in Shadowlands, you will need to unlock all of the following talents: Deathstrike, Icebound Fortitude, Anti-Magic Shell, Lichborn, Anti-Magic Zone, Mind Freeze, Chains of Ice, Death's Advance, Corpse Explosion, Control Undead, and to some degree Asphyxiate, which was previously only baseline for Blood Decays and a talent for Frost and Unholy. Furthermore, for Deathstrike specifically, you will need to unlock the new improved Deathstrike talent, which is quite deep in the blood column. By default, Deathstrike heals you for 25% of the damage taken in the last 5 seconds, and improved Deathstrike makes this 40%. The same as what it already does by default for DPS DKs in Shadowlands. So only with both the Deathstrike and improved Deathstrike talents, Deathstrike will heal for the same amount in Dragonflight as it did in Shadowlands for DPS DK. Granted, it'll cost a little bit less runic power. As you can see, not only do we need to spend at least 10 talent points to get back all of the utility spells which were previously baseline, but they also compete with other previously optional utility options like Blinding Sleet, Death's Reach, Wravewalk and more. In my opinion, there are too many of the baseline Deathknight spells in the talent tree, especially if you compare our tree and baseline abilities to what for example Druids get. Not only do Druids get way more of their spells baseline, but they also often don't need to pick up spells of other specializations as much as DKs do. For example, a balanced Druid has almost no use for the complete left side of the Druid class tree except for Incap Roar / Mighty Bash and potentially Furor, whereas an Unholy DK would be very stupid not to take Chains of Ice, Icebound Fortitude, Mind Freeze and all of the following throughput talents. This brings me to my next point, which is about exactly these throughput talents in the DK class tree. As previously mentioned, according to Blizzard, the class talent trees should not give a player the feeling that they have to give up all of their utility because of feeling forced to pick throughput talents. If we examine the tree, we can identify two main areas where most of the throughput talents are located. One of these blocks is deep into the Frost column, and then another block is located early on in the Unholy column. The Frost throughput block especially seems very strong as it offers many talents that focus on resource generation, for example Empower Rune Weapon, Runic Attenuation, Horn of Winter and a choice between Runic Empowerment or Runic Corruption. Resource generation has historically proven to be a very valuable form of throughput increase for every DK spec. Therefore, I expect a vast majority of DK builds to go deep into the Frost column to pick up most if not all of the throughput talents located here. The second DPS block is the Unholy block, which has most of its throughput talents located more towards the top of the talent tree. However, there are two very strong options in Unholy Bond and Soul Reaper towards the bottom of the Unholy column. As a performance-oriented player, you want to make the most of your talent points, and with the current iteration of the DK class talent tree, you are semi-forced to pick up all the Throughput talent from both the Frost and the Unholy column. If you do so, you only have a couple points left to spend on actual choices which are interesting to you. Now you will be faced with some hard questions. Do you take Death's Advance, or would you like to gain some runic power from interrupting? Maybe you're willing to sacrifice some execute DPS to instead gain more utility? It's not all doom and gloom though, as the talent tree gives us some cool new and returning options, for example proliferating chill, which makes Chains of Ice hit an additional target, Blinding Sleet, now available to all specs, the previous PvP talent Death's Echo, and of course everyone's favorite slappy hands Abomination Limb. More of those cool new options please. Now the location of Abomination Limb is quite suboptimal, as it can only be reached by heavily investing into the Blood column, which has no other Throughput talent in it. This means, in practice, Abomination Limb will most likely be an extreme niche pick and be mostly avoided by Throughput-oriented players, as they will feel forced to spend their talent points into other and better options. As some of you may have already realized, one iconic Deathknight ability is missing from this talent tree. Of course, it is Gorefiend's Grasp. As it stands currently, Blizzard has decided that Gorefiend's Grasp is a spec-exclusive ability only available to Blood Deathknights. A short look back in history. Gorefiend's Grasp was added as a talent option for all DK specs back in Mists of Pandaria, and only recently since Legion has it been exclusive to Blood DKs, after it has seen a lot of use in raiding in both MOP and Warlords of Draenor raid encounters. In my opinion, a spell like Gorefiend's Grasp has to be available to every DK spec, and I would like to see it moved to the Deathknight class talent tree. I'm a strong proponent of utility parity between different specs of the same class, and we're getting some of that for DK with the options of Blinding Sleet or Death's Reach. There are not many other high impact utility spells like Gorefiend's Grasp that are this restricted to one spec for other classes. For example, it does not matter what kind of monk you bring, they always have the option to use Ring of Peace. Another example of great raiding utility would be Stampeding Roar, an ability available to every druid spec. If you look at the raid utility of a DPS Deathknight, then you always have to ask yourself the question, why not bring a Blood Deathknight, as they bring the same or even improved and more utility to the raid. The new talent system makes this issue even worse, because a tank can easily justify sacrificing DPS for utility, whereas a DPS is semi-forced to pick Throughput options. You can actually become a complete crowd control machine as a Blood DK, with Gorefiend's Grasp, Abomination Limb, Double Death Grip, which also has a longer range, Blinding Sleet, 12-second cooldown on Mind Freeze, Asphyxiate, 40-second cooldown on AMS, an improved AMZ, and 2 target Chains of Ice, and to top all of that off, you don't even lose that much throughput. A DPS DK can only dream of bringing a fraction of that utility to a group, as they have to focus so much on the throughput talents of the baseline DK talent tree. As a side note, the maximum damage absorption of Anti-Magic Zone currently scales with the maximum HP of the Deathknight. This is obviously to the benefit of Blood DKs, and also another one of those things that make Blood DK utility better than DPS DK utility. In my opinion, this needs to change in Dragonflight. Either adjust the cap for higher expected maximum HP for Blood DKs, or make it scale based on attack power, a value that is usually mostly dependent on gear and more likely to be similar between a tank and a DPS. I strongly advise Blizzard to rethink the DK class talent tree and make sure that we have all utility options of the class available for every spec, including Gorefiend's Grasp. You should also not be able to pick up all the utility on a spec like Blood DK without losing much, while being forced to forego those options on a DPS DK in favor of damage. I would like to see more abilities like Icebound Fortitude, Anti-Magic Shell and Death's Advance being made baseline, and have the amount or the location of Throughput talents be reconsidered. Furthermore, I would like to see the choice node between Runic Empowerment and Runic Corruption to be removed. This node will just come down to Math, and a similar choice in previous talent trees was removed exactly because it was such a boring talent. My suggestion, make Runic Corruption baseline for all DK specs and be done with it. As it stands right now, the class talent tree is a clear downgrade to what we have in Shadowlands. I hope that Blizzard is open to feedback, so let me know what you think about the class talent tree and what changes the developers should make in the comments below. In the next video, we will take a look at a specialization specific talent tree for Frost DK, so make sure to like and subscribe, and see you guys next time.